Hi, everybody. My name's Sarah McCarthy. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to be discussing local water done well, and you all have an opportunity to ask questions, and we're hoping that our wonderful guests are going to be able to answer them all for you today. So while we're waiting for some more people to turn up, I'm just going to have a really quick reminder of what local water done well actually is. So it's the Coalition Government's plan to address New Zealand's long-standing water infrastructure challenges. And so when we talk about three waters, we're talking about stormwater, which is the water that comes off the roads and goes down culverts and into the drains and stuff. And when there's a flood, and all that stuff. Wastewater, which is the water that we flush and comes out of the shower and your dishwasher and your washing machine. And water supply infrastructure. So that's all the pipes and bits that get the water into your house so you can make a cup of tea. Does that sound about right, all of you actual experts?
Good.
Yeah? Look at me, I'm doing great today. So we've got a few questions and stuff from people. So do you all want to introduce yourselves and let everybody know who you are? You want to start with Mr. Ben?
Sure thing. Hi everyone, my name is Ben Bell. I'm the Mayor of the Gore District, and I'm one of the 4 councils proposing that we work together.
Jason, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, no problem. Hi, I'm Jason Domigan. I'm the General Manager of Critical Services here at the Gore District Council. So I oversee the Three Waters team, which we're talking about today, but also roading, solid waste and emergency management. So that's part of my portfolio. Nice to be here tonight.
Welcome. And Stuart Cross beaming into us live from Wellington. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Stu Cross. I'm director at Morrison Lowe, which is a management consulting firm that advises public sector clients on all things to do with infrastructure, from business cases right through to procurement and ongoing service delivery, but mainly been involved in water reform work for about the last 7 or 8 years in varying different roles, and particularly at the moment and of relevance at the moment in relation to the Otago and Southland groups and this group of the Southern Water Done Well thing.
Excellent. We've got the crack team on it tonight. We've got everyone that we need to talk to. So where do we want to start, everybody? Do we want to start talking about some bits and pieces that you're ready to talk about? I've got some questions already lined up, so it's up to you. I'm just here to look good. I'm nailing it.
You want to kick us off?
We can just rip straight into the questions or talk more about.
Sure. Sounds good to me.
Yep.
Okay. Just using technology. I managed to wrangle the iPad off my son, so that's a win again for today. Okay, so we've got a question. If the new proposed organisation is billing for water, will our rates go down? That's a good question. Who wants to take that one?
I can if you like. And then Stu and Jason can back me up if I get anything wrong. So yes, essentially your rates bill will go down, but that's your rates bill. When the CCO gets going, the expectation is that you'd get 2 bills. So you get your water bill and you get your rates bill. So yes, your rates bill would be lower, but we're not kidding anyone. You will be still paying the same amount theoretically in terms of dollar value. Does that answer the question well enough, Sarah, team?
I think you got it bang on, Ben, so I'm not going to elaborate on that.
Okay, so like if I'm paying $10 in rates and it goes down to $8, I'd be paying $2 on top of it for water then, kind of.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're paying those sort of numbers, I don't know where you're getting your rates from, but well done.
Yeah, according to my husband, I live in a dream world, so that's what that's happening there. But I just like the smaller numbers because the big ones stress me out. All right, I've got another question. Are we ready? Will rural ratepayers be billed even if they're not using any water services on their property? That's really interesting. So if you've got I'm assuming if you've got a water tank and you're not hooked up to, if you've got your own septic tank as well, how's that going to work?
All right, I'll take that one then, shall I? I think no is the short answer. Basically, in the Gore District at the moment, around Three Waters, you're only charged for the services that you use relating to water. So if you don't have a charge currently, then you won't receive a charge under the proposed joint entity through the Three Waters setup that we're looking at.
And how will they make sure that, I mean, will people come and check your property, or do you have a list?
We have all that information currently, so we're relatively confident of people who have access to council water supply, receiving wastewater, have wastewater connections and stormwater, and so those will just transfer across to the new organisation.
Okay, sounds good.
Sorry, Sarah. Did Stu just want to touch on some of the work that we have done around rural water, though, and our rural water schemes? Because I think that is important to anyone who is in that rural sector to understand.
Yeah, I can elaborate on the rural water stuff as well. So when we talk about rural water, I think one thing that we've got to be clear as well is and I think I'll just preface this whole conversation with everything we're talking about in Southern Water Done Well, we're talking about in relation to assets that council owns or water services that council currently provides to people, right? So when I talk about rural water, I'm talking about the people who are receiving water who live in a rural area, but they're receiving water from a council already through a council-owned scheme. So in Gore, that's particularly relevant to people who are on the Glen Kennock scheme, which actually isn't provided by Gore District Council, the water, but that's through Clutha District Council. But that scheme crosses the boundary between Clutha and Gore. One of the key things that we have identified, I guess, through this group is that we're a group of rural and provincial councils. And because we're a group of rural and provincial councils, we know that water is really important to people who live rurally for not just their livelihoods in terms of their personal health, their personal drinking water needs, but also for the stock water, particularly water that's used for stock and for grazing and sometimes for irrigation as well. So one of the things that's been proposed through this group is that we set up or that we recognise water as a fourth water. So normally when we talk about water reform or Three Waters reform, if we want to use, I guess, the old language that Labor government used and that was stolen from the infrastructure specialists who've been using the term Three Waters for a long time before that. We're talking about wastewater, stormwater, and drinking water. But now we're saying actually rural water is different and has a different level of service for customers. There's a different way of charging for it. There are different challenges and there are different issues relating to it. So we want to recognise that as a fourth water and make sure that when we are talking about rural water and when the entity is thinking about water and service delivery, it's got some clear expectations around what is needed for rural water as well as for stormwater, drinking water and wastewater. That's probably it in a nutshell. I can go into more detail if more questions come up around that, but I'll leave that there for now. But just to note again, when we're talking about rural water, that is not the water that you're getting from a bore or a rainwater tank or from your own private supply, or we're not talking about the I've forgotten the name of that scheme that left you guys.
Otama.
Yeah, we're not talking about Otama. Otama is going to stay as a privately run scheme at the moment for as long as it wants to be a privately run scheme. So we're not talking about taking over any of those schemes. We are really just talking about the rural water that is supplied by councils.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm a tank girl myself, so I like being aware that that's all been thought of. I know we're all very clever at councils, but I'm never sure. So do we want to, if you got, I know you've all got talking points that you're gagging to get to, but I've got a few more questions. This is your party. What would you like to do? Do you want to do some more talking points or more questions? What do you reckon? Another question?
They're good. There's sparking talking points as well, so that's good.
Okay, here we go. Are you ready? Just talking about what we were just talking about before, very interesting. Are residents allowed to drill on their land to obtain water? So I'm guessing everything goes through and they're like, right, I'm going to dig me a well. Are they allowed to do that?
I'll try and cover that one. That's a bit outside the scope of Three Waters, which Stuart was just talking about. But those rules are generally covered through district plans and regional plans. So Environment Southland has rules around abstraction of water, and councils have rules too in their districts plans about earthworks and those sort of things. So those will still apply as they do now. So what we're talking about through Southern Water Done Well is the supply of those services through that the council owns, being water supply, wastewater, and stormwater.
Okay.
I'll just add to that one briefly, not too much. But overall, what that means is that the rights that you currently have around whether you can or cannot drill a well on your property are going to be the same as a result of this as what they were at the moment. So whether you can or cannot, I can't answer, but it's not going to change because of the proposals that we're putting out. But one thing I would just note, just I guess for clarity, is if you're currently getting water from Gore District Council for a Gore supply, and then you decide you're going to stick a well on your property to try and avoid the charges and get water through that. Most councils in the country, and I haven't checked your fees and charges schedule and pricing at the moment, do have a serviceability charge, which is that we would charge you if you're able to get water from our scheme and you decide you're not going to. And we would expect the entity would probably still continue to have a serviceability charge of some sort probably in the future. So there's not an easy way of I guess, gaming the system if that's what you're thinking of doing with the well. But if it's just a rural property and you don't get water at the moment, like I say, if you're allowed to do it at the moment, you'll be allowed to do it later.
Oh, well, I'm just going to have to get rid of all those trucks that I've got there, digged wells for cash on them. But that's okay. We can use them for something else. Right. Here's one that is super fun. What is the council's stance on fluoridation?
It sounds like a political one, so I'll take that. The council's stance on fluoridation, I guess, is we haven't been asked, we haven't been directed by the Ministry of Health to fluoridate the water. So, in all honesty, we're not going to take on that cost unnecessarily. If we are to get that directive, as other councils have, and they've fought that decision, that'll have to be a decision for council at the time. But we haven't been requested to. We have no plans to. So that's basically it. End of. I know I get that question a lot. So,
anyone else? I'm going to dive into the fluoro thing, Stu? No? All right.
No.
Okay, so we've got a question here. Who looks after all the day-to-day work, like fixing leaks? So I'm assuming if we have a CCO and then something happens, who's going to do that?
Cool. Especially, I guess I'll take that one. In the short term, it's still going to be the same. Yeah, that's the idea. We still need staff to go out and deliver water. But as we go through this process and then we move into transitioning to something, if that's the outcome of it, it may be that they work for a different entity, but they will still be delivering the services that residents are in our communities are currently receiving. And yeah, we would expect that to continue on. And there'll be councils will still have the opportunity to feed into this joint entity. So they'll be making sure that they're accountable and achieving the levels of service that our communities expect.
Okay, nice.
Add to that as well, Sarah. I think that the ethos from a political sense and especially from the mayors is to keep everyone where they are as much as possible. So that if you're dealing with Sarah, for example, today, that you're still dealing with Sarah in 3 years' time, that person doesn't move. We also are trying to steer away from having a big fancy building in one of our locations. The good thing about us four councils is there's no natural place that's right in the middle. So if you go in Gore, Alexandra, Oamaru or Clutha, it's always someone slightly disadvantaged. So we're really following the ethos of trying to keep people more or less where they are now.
Okay, that sounds good. Stu, you got anything on that one?
I think Jason and Ben have covered that off pretty well, so I'll refrain from adding anything.
Awesome. We're racking up the points tonight, chat, so I'm so excited. Right, got another question. So this isn't me because I wouldn't ask questions about money because it's too freaky, but I read somewhere that it will cost $13.8 million to set up the CCO. Is that right? It seems like a lot of money.
I think that probably is a question for me. And look, it is a lot of money. And we have, what I'll say is that number isn't the number that we know we're going to spend on setting up a CCO. We don't know, we don't have a precise transition budget, and we'll form a transition budget once there is agreement from all the councils to actually go ahead. That's based on some really early estimates about what we think it could cost, and includes some of the costs for setting up new IT systems, which don't need to be invested in on day one, and don't need to necessarily be invested in for a number of years, but are typically very expensive to set up. So there are definitely some really big setup costs. I think what I would say about that is that when we look at this entity and the modelling that's been done in terms of the financial savings and the costs and benefits of it, over the next 7 years, and I'm only using 7 years because, or over the first 7 years of the entity being in place, and I'm using that because we don't think the entity is going to start for another 2 years. And then by 2034, we're expecting that that's the end of the LTP period. So I'm just using the LTP period because that's something that I guess our councils have already published and people might understand. But over that time period, we're expecting the entity will save $43 million across all of the customers that it's serving. And that's after we take into account those $13 million worth of establishment costs. So, and we take into account any other establishment costs as well. And that number just continues to grow. So at that point, the entity hasn't even managed to get all of its savings that we think it could make. It hasn't managed to really bed down and get into where we think it's going to start making really big savings. Over the long term, that savings number gets really, really big. So, look, I think, yes, the 13 million is really big, but sometimes you have to spend some money to save some money. And I guess that's what we're really trying to do here is it's a spend to save. And what I can say is I'm pretty confident that all of the councils are committed to keeping the cost of establishing the entity as low as they can be, with, I guess, the proviso that they still want this thing to be successful. And so we're not going to cut corners where we don't think where we don't think we can cut corners, but we will be looking to keep the cost of setting this thing up as low as they can be, but still setting it up for success.
Anything else to add, Chibbies?
I think as well, when you compare it to the other model, of setting up 4 individual CCOs as well, that's set up cost times 4 each individually. So at least we're, yes, I agree with Stu of it's a bit of an investment up front, but we're actually sharing that across the 4 councils. And then that only increases if we increase the numbers of councils as well. If more councils want to come along at a later date, we've already done that setup, which those economies of scale just get better the further you go along. The other bit that I think would be good to highlight, and I hope that Stu's okay with me sharing this, but we've also been quite conservative with the numbers as well, which is rare in local government. Usually we like to make the numbers look a whole lot better than they actually are, but in this case, we've been really conservative so that people get, I wouldn't say worst case scenario, but it's, it doesn't show how good this really could be. Yeah. And I think we'll get that out there a bit more after the consultation period. And, this is a moving feast. The numbers change quite often, and as does government policy.
Mm-hmm. Jace, you got anything for that one?
No, that's right. I was just going to add that too, that, it is shared across the councils, and this is the whole point of working together, really. It's about trying to be as efficient as we can. That's what our community wants. We're not trying to hide from the fact that there's a hell of a lot of work to be done in the water space. That's why we're doing this, is that we can't do this alone. As much as we would just love to continue going the way we are, we're in a position where we've got to make some hard choices, and this is one of them. So this really is an opportunity for us to work together. We've got councils that have, who understand that and have agreed to sort of to come in and really try and get something that's better for their communities in the long term. So that's the positive part of being part of this setup.
I mean, because this has to be done. This is central government saying this is what we're doing. And so essentially this is like when you go to a wedding and you all club in with your mates so that you can get the bride and groom something really good instead of having to buy them something a bit useless each, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. And I think just to round it out, Ben's right. We've been, as a consulting firm, I always deliberately take a very conservative approach on some of this modelling here, because I don't want people to think, hey, they've gold-plated this thing. They've made it look really, really good. So we have tried to be quite conservative with our guesses around. Well, I won't say guesses. Our estimates and our working out what we think the cost could be to establish an entity. We've tried to be very conservative around that, as well as when we've looked at the efficiency. So our efficiencies are probably a little bit lower than what we think they could be, or what some other consultants have suggested they could be. Meanwhile, our actual establishment costs are a bit higher. And like Ben says, as we develop scale with this entity, and if more people decide to join us, we spread that across more people. The costs of establishing the entity don't grow. They don't grow by a fifth just because we're adding another council. They're going to grow by a smaller proportion. It's not a certain amount of dollars per council. There's kind of a base cost, I guess, that we need to recover. And this is absolutely, that's right. It's response to what the government's asked us to do. They've put a challenge forward for us. They've said, can you show us how you're going to deliver Three Waters financially sustainably, how you can deliver Three Waters in a way that is delivering the right level of service for the community, delivering really good quality infrastructure that's compliant with all the standards, and can you show us how you can do it in the most affordable and financially sustainable way? And this is what I guess these four councils have come up to do, and they are stepping up to that challenge in a way that that I think is really to be commended. The collaboration and the enthusiasm among the group, I think, is something that that is really encouraging, and certainly sets a really good groundwork for this entity to be successful in the future.
Oh, that's really good to hear, Stu. Thank you. I know so much work has been put in by so many people getting this sort of where it is now, and we've just got nowhere to go but up from here, I guess. And our community have got some big questions to answer, and we are going to go through all of those options later on. I've got one question left, unless we've got some people, or I can see there's people watching us. Hello, everybody. Do ask away, even if it's a dumb question. I'm always asking dumb questions and I get the best answers. So don't be embarrassed if you've got something that sounds really stupid. Like often everyone else is stupid as well. They're just too shy to answer. So you be the big brave person. Right, I've got one here. So this is a hard question. Will there be a duplication of overheads? What does it even mean?
I'll have a little bit of a crack at this, and then I don't know if the others will want to join in or not. So when we think about a duplication of overheads, I guess there's a few different ways that we can cut this, but I think I'll get to the heart of what I think you're asking, which is at the moment, I guess every council has a whole pile of costs relating to running a building, the electricity paying for that building. They've got teams of staff that are actually really more support staff than they are frontline staff or delivering services. So we've got a finance team, we've got HR teams, we've got health and safety, sometimes some of the comms and engagement people, depending on how that's all worked out. And sorry, I don't mean to point that one out with you on the line, Sarah. But all of those people, often what we see in councils is that those costs aren't funded directly from your rates, in terms of we don't set a rate that pays for comms and engagement, and we don't set a rate that pays for finance in the council, but we do set a rate for water, and we do set a rate for wastewater, and we set a rate for stormwater. So the way we recover those costs for finance and HR and support and all of that kind of stuff is through charging an overhead charge out to those Three Waters activities, and whatever else other activities we charge a rate for at the moment. So that might be roading, it might be parks and recreation, it might be your sporting facilities, culture and heritage, all those kind of activities. When we take Three Waters away from council, those overheads won't be able to be funded from that Three Waters activity anymore. So those overheads will still be in council, and they will still be costs that need to be recovered from ratepayers in some form or description in the future. Sometimes we'll hear those referred to as stranded overheads, but they're not really water costs anyhow. They're costs that relate to running a council and running the business of a council. Now, some of those staff might provide a reasonable amount of their time towards Three Waters, and some of those staff might have opportunities to transfer into the entity. But by and large, the staff that stay, there might be a stranded cost there. What I would suggest around that is that, one, the entity is not that big, right? So the entity will be looking to procure some of those services itself. It may need to get some finance support. It may need to get some HR support. May need to get some comms and engagement support, some customer services. It may even need to get some building space from someone. So it will have some services that it can buy from councils to recover some of those stranded overhead costs. For the councils to recover that. And also, over time, we'd expect the councils will have to look at themselves a little bit and have a look at what their services are that they provide and make sure that they are right-sized for that. That may mean that there is some restructuring that happens. It may mean that they rely on things like natural attrition, which is where staff who resign, they don't get replaced, and we reallocate roles around. It may mean that the council looks to provide more services to its community and make better use of those staff in a different way that we can deliver value for that stranded overhead that's in the council. Those are all options for the councils to consider once Three Waters happens. In terms of other duplication of overheads, no, we're not expecting that we're going to have 5 finance people because we're going to take one finance person from each council and bring them into the water entity. We're going to take across the right number of people to cover off those costs. I think that's probably, hopefully that has covered the question. If not, I'm happy for someone else to either jump in or to ask some other questions around that.
You two, you happy?
Yeah, I think I actually, this probably isn't good to say on the webinar, but I think I actually learned something there. I knew of it, but it's nice to have it. You explained that really, really well, Stu, that it makes a lot more sense in my head. I absolutely knew that. But yeah, well done, Stu. That was good.
Hey, thanks, Stu. You're good at your job. Well done, man. Well done. We'll write a letter to yourself, saying as you're the director, but we'll write you a good letter.
Thanks.
So I've just got a question come up, and I don't know if this might kind of tie into what we've just been talking about. What happens with assets like parks or roads that may double as stormwater retention or pathways? No, it doesn't actually, but.
No, that makes sense to me, but I reckon Jason might be slightly better placed to answer that than me. But if he struggles, I'll probably have a crack as well.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. Look, I mean, it goes down to what the main purpose of the asset is. So if we use parks, for example, and they have an ancillary function as part of a stormwater retention, etc., those will stay in the council ownership. But for retention basins, I guess like the one at Elizabeth Street that we've created currently, the idea with that asset would, which is just a water's asset, would continue to maintain that function. The assets are staying with the council anyway, in terms of the ownership. Is that right? Technically.
Through the council's shareholding in the water.
Yeah, through the shareholding, that's right.
Yeah, so the council will still have, I guess, a traceable line of ownership, but it's not going to sit on the council's asset list. There was a ton of work done by the National Transition Unit back when Labor had its Three Waters reform process around stormwater assets, and stormwater assets, particularly those ones that interface with roads and parks. And there was a whole pile of work done in terms of what defines a stormwater asset and what doesn't. And we're not intending to reinvent the wheel here. So some of that work was, whether it was by the previous government or the existing government, some of that work was good work. And we're still going to be looking to pick up some of that work around stormwater assets. One of the things that they were talking about there was having special agreements basically between the council and the water entity to ensure that the water entity is allowed to do the work that it needs to do on these assets that have 2 functions. But typically any of the ones that do have 2 functions would stay in council, and then the water entity would just have a special agreement between the council and itself that effectively allows it to do work on those assets for the purpose of stormwater management.
All right, we're happy with that. Awesome. Jason, I've got a question for you. what's in a joint CCO for Gore? What challenges are we facing with our infrastructure?
That's a good question. I think, look, for Gore, we have the same challenges that are being faced around the country. That's why we're here. That's why the previous government went through the water reforms program. It's why the current coalition government has reconstituted it into this new format. But the reality is that we have a huge infrastructure deficit across the country, and Three Waters is a big contributor to that. We haven't collected funding over the years to replace those assets, and they're starting to get to the end of their life. We can't just continue to maintain them. They're going to need to be replaced. There's a significant amount of cost in that. We haven't depreciated those assets, so we don't have that funding sitting there in a little pot. We haven't been charging ratepayers over the last sort of 50 to 80 years money to put aside for that. And so now we've got a considerable amount of work to do over the next sort of 20 to 40 years, when a lot of that infrastructure is going to need replacing. So in Gore, you've already seen it with our water treatment plants. So our new build at East Gore, we've upgraded that. So that's replacing that our existing or prior water treatment facility, and we've done the same in Matoda, where we've upgraded that existing one so that it's now future-proofed. But those are just the start. There's been a fair bit of conversation around about our wastewater treatment plants and the need to upgrade them to meet improved environmental standards. And on top of that, we've actually just got to start replacing some pipes. The difficult part with water is obviously a lot of our infrastructure is under the ground. You can't see it, but it's getting to the stage from a time perspective that we need to replace it. We've done a fair bit of work in terms of asset condition around our wastewater network, so we've got a really good understanding there, but we've still got a fair bit to do in terms of our water supply network and understanding that. And it's not just as simple as, we put it in 60 years ago, so it's due. The conditions in the ground affect that, the type of pipe that it's made out of. So actually undertaking that asset condition work's a pretty chunky piece of work in itself, let alone then going through the significant cost of actually replacing these assets as prior to them failing. If we don't do that, that's what's going to start to happen. We will start to see critical failures in terms of some of our network. That means water outages. That means burst mains. Those sorts of things that are create real sort of havoc amongst the community, and we want to avoid that at all costs. But there's a significant cost required to upgrade that infrastructure, and that's effectively what's driving this conversation. The cost to do that, we just can't do this by ourselves. We know our community's struggling with business as usual, let alone the infrastructure upgrades that we're not proposing to make, that we have to make. We've tried to delay this as much as possible, so that we haven't replaced assets that don't need replacing, but D-Day is effectively coming, and we've got to start doing that. And it's going to cost money to do it. So that's why we're here. So
we basically, this isn't the glamour stuff or the fun stuff. This is the actual, if we don't have water, so are we going to have water in the taps, and where's the water coming from, and all that kind of business. This is real nuts and bolts stuff, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's critical to the well-being of our communities. And that's what's driven it. There's been a lot made of the Havelock North situation, and we've seen now increasing standards from that. It's just we're at a different place now where we need to start investing significantly in our water infrastructure. There's just no shortcutting that. We can't just do it cheaper. The water assets need replacing. Otherwise, people won't have water. Otherwise, we'll start seeing, wastewater mains fail, and the outcomes of those. We've got to start getting on with this work.
Okay. I just while we were seeing if some more people want to ask some more questions. You've absolutely nailed it tonight, question askers. Thank you so much. We've all learned something. Ben's learned something today. I'm so excited. I've learned so many things, but to be honest, it's not that hard to teach me something. What about what we're talking about with our talking points? Because I don't know if anyone here knows what a talking point is. But a talking point is basically a list before you start. Please do not forget to say these really important things so our community knows these things. So do we feel like we've made a good go on all the things we wanted to say today? Do we all understand what Southern Water does well as? What do you reckon, guys?
I guess I'll touch on we're a little bit unique because we're the only Southland Council in this joint group. So there's a couple of different pieces that we have to consider. So to anyone listening, obviously there's an amalgamation conversation that's happening at the moment as well, led by Southland District Council. So this has nothing to do with that. This is an amalgamation. This is something the government has asked us to do well ahead of any of those amalgamation talks. It isn't an effort to try and avoid amalgamation. We'd love to work with both Southland and Invercargill on waters, but they've chosen to go a different way, and that's what their community wants, and that's what they want, and that's perfectly fine. That's how this legislation was designed, that every council gets to make their own decision. Just to talk a little bit about the option that they've picked and the differences to what we've picked. So as everyone said, changes are coming, whether you like them or not. And so the options we've been given, there was a whole bunch of them, but the three that really came out were joint CCO, a single CCO, or to do a different type of in-house BAU. So what that means, and Invercargill and Southland have both gone for that business as usual model, but they have to ring fence waters, which sounds very easy on paper. And if they're doing it already, probably is. But what government's making very clear is that the Commerce Commission, so the economic regulator, wants to see what that looks like. So those are the finite details, the difference between what we're doing, which is the joint CCO working together, whereas the in-house, which Southland and Invercargill decided to go to, will still be a change for them, just a less of a change, unless the Commerce Commission finds something they don't like, and then we'll see how that all pans out.
Anyone else got a thought they're bursting to share with us this evening? We've got a couple more questions popping through, but we can give people a breather and let them have more of a think.
I guess I'll just, I'm probably a bit of a numbers man, but I don't want to actually dwell on the numbers at this point. But I just kind of want to add to that kind of, what does Gore get out of this, or what does any council get out of this, right? And there's the numbers, there's the savings. But I think, touching on some of that stuff Jason was saying as well earlier, I guess to me more critically is you get scale and you get resilience in your workforce. You get more people on the ground spread across a bigger area. You get opportunities to work better with your neighbours and think about how different schemes can be operated and run more efficiently. The Glen Kennock scheme, which serves more Gore residents than it does Clutha residents, but is owned and run by Clutha, is a really good example of one where, is that most efficiently run by Clutha going forward? I mean, it might be that the water treatment plant's in Clutha's boundary, but that doesn't mean that the network isn't. So there are all these opportunities just to work better together and to work in a way that we collaborate. And I think the other one that's really important that I don't know that I heard Jason touch on, but is really big in the water industry, is that there is a massive shortage of really good staff in the water industry. Councils across the country struggle to attract good staff and retain good staff. So if you do get really good staff members, they might only be with you for a while until there's something bigger and better for them to move on to. And I don't, this isn't me trying to poo-poo small councils or rural or provincial councils, but rural and provincial councils don't offer those same level of opportunities to people that are Wellington or in Auckland, like for its water care or Christchurch or Dunedin even necessarily offer. So the way that we can try and offer this and make the workplace more attractive and get some really good staff, some good specialists, get some really good workforce resilience is to try and build that scale and try and create that kind of dedicated focus where our training is all developed around that. We've got really good skills development within our workforce, got really clear career opportunities. That's the stuff that's going to get people into the organization, that's going to bring the scale. It's going to make that organization hum. It's going to make it really be able to deliver stuff in a way that all of these individual councils combined can't do on their own. And that's not to say that you don't have dedicated, really professional, really good staff in your organizations, but you also struggle to fill vacancies, and you also struggle to get the staff that you do need when they do move on to something else. So I think that's a really, really important benefit that can come out of this entity, and that's a benefit for all of the councils in there. So I think that was probably the other thing I just wanted to touch on really is this other focus that's not really about numbers, but it's about people and delivering better services, and probably more passionate people as well, people that are more enthusiastic about delivering water, which, you know, for some of us can be pretty boring, but is incredibly important. So.
I've got a secret hankering for infrastructure, so don't you worry, Stu. I get it, but that is really important, and especially because small councils do have a problem with attracting and retaining really exciting and excited staff, because it isn't as good looking as the big places, and I think that's really important, and it's important for people to know that, you know, then you get someone really good, but then they go because they've gotten really good, so this is a better chance for us to keep those really good people. And I think that's something that's easy for us all to forget. Well, I've got a couple more questions unless someone's got something really cool they want to say. But it doesn't even have to be cool. No? All right. Will Gore continue to get the special power deal in the CCO? Do we all know what that one is? I even know what that one is.
Yeah. Jason might be able to describe the deal better than I can. That's actually a really good question. I guess the short answer is we don't know. The second answer is probably one that I don't want to say too loudly in front of the power companies, but I suspect that we will try our best to make sure that we do get it, and that might include whether we look at how we do or do not transfer certain assets over to that water entity as we go through that design process, because that power deal, I think, you know, is a very good power deal. It certainly really has worked really well for the ratepayers and residents of Gore to date in terms of keeping costs down. So it's certainly something that we need to think about. I would suggest that even if it doesn't get it, there is enough money in terms of the savings that this entity we think can produce that will probably more than compensate for the increased power costs. But those increased power costs are not small, so we will be trying our best to keep the deal. But I don't know whether Jason wants to elaborate on what the deal actually is, because I'm kind of talking around as though everyone knows.
No, well, again, that's the well-documented penny per unit scheme that was agreed almost almost 100 years ago now. So I think
per unit. I just think that's the big tell.
Yeah, that's showing how historic it is, and something we're really proud of in Gore, and we've fought hard, to keep that over the years. And I think, I think Stu outlined it though. Like, we'll do everything we can, but at this stage we don't know. Again, a lot of the detail of what people are asking hasn't really been fleshed out yet. We've still got to do a lot of that work. Again, we've had a pretty tight timeline in terms of pulling together water service delivery plans under the Water Services Act, 12 months, I think it was, from D-Day. So, we've had to sort of come together quite quickly and push this through, looking from a governance structure down. But yeah, look, we'll be absolutely advocating wherever we can to try and get the best deal for the Gore community still. And the penny per unit power deal would be part of that.
Just on just on those timeframes and just further explaining that, you know, this is still high level stuff, because we don't want to go down the path and do really in-depth exploration on this stuff and then bloody politicians, councillors, mayors turn around and go, oh no, we're not going to do that anymore. So we want to save money that way, hear from the community, know that they're right behind us on this, and then we'll do some really in-depth stuff and communicate that out to the community as well.
Okay. So I've got another one. This might be about the same thing, and I'm just too attractive to understand what it means. What will happen with the current easements over assets? Is that the same kind of thing as a penny per unit, or is there other? Do we have other easements? I really should know.
No, the easements that I think are being referred to are so on a number of properties throughout the district. The council has easements vested in it to maintain water operations. So you might have a water supply pipe that runs through the edge of your property, for example, that has an easement over it, so the council can still access it and service it. And so those will transfer to the water CCO under this process.
Okay, so that won't be GDC anymore. That'll be Southern Water Done Well kind of thing. But exactly the same deal, just a different.
Yes. Yep.
Same club, different DJ.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Got another question here. This is a fun one. Will local elected councillors still have a say on the CCO? Will we retain local control of water? Thanks.
Yes, I've been waiting for you to ask me this one, Sarah, and thank you, Mel, for the question. Yes, so there's a couple of different ways that we'll retain control. So first is that each council as a shareholder will have the ability to appoint a director to run the CCO. So that's a really important level of control that the council has. And then if you know about Great South, that's another CCO that Gore is a part of with Invercargill, Environment Southland and Southland District Council. And what happens there, as it will with the CCO, is there's a process called letter of expectations and then statements of intent. So letter of expectations basically lists out all the different bits of work that we expect you to do. And then the CCO will go away, take that away, and they'll come back to us with a statement of intent and go, this is all the things that we'll be able to do within this year. So that's a process that we undertake with Great South currently. It'll be the same thing for the CCO. So councillors will have a say on what is in that letter of expectation and be able to give feedback on the statement of intent. So there is still plenty of control. And also comparing it to the Three Waters model that the Labor government had, that was taking assets completely off councils and putting it into an entity with no local control whatsoever. That's not the case here. Councils will still own a shareholding in the CCO, and if it really comes to it, although it'd be quite complicated, a council could pull out if there was enough force to do so. So there's plenty of local control still there.
Okay. Anyone else? Sorry, that sounded a bit strident. Hey guys, has anyone else got anything else to say about that?
Yeah, Ben's covered that pretty well.
Yeah.
He just did it so well that I just shut that one down. All right, we're coming to the end of our time together. But I think that, and we're running out of, everyone's asked all their questions, but they're still here, so that's good. I'm just going to be boring, so jump in if you've got things that you've remembered that you meant to say, because we're all friends here and we all forget. We're just going to have that really quick chat about what the options are, and this is what our community is being asked. And I know people, we're asking a lot of questions at the moment, and this is neat. Okay, but this is another question. It can't wait. We can't wait till after the election. We can't wait till after the thing. This just has to happen. And we can just blame the government for it. So that's fine. So we've got three options when we're talking about Southern Water Done Well. So the first option is a jointly owned council-controlled organisation, which is the CCO that people talk about. And when you have a look at it, now all this information, and it's absolutely gorgeously packaged, it's all on the Gore District Council Let's Talk portal, and that is where you'll find all sorts of cool things where people are asking you questions about all sorts of stuff that you might be interested in or want to give your opinion on. So the Let's Talk Gore dc.govt.nz. Just Google Gore Let's Talk and it'll get you there. So that's our first option. So when it says it there, the council's preferred option, but tell me if I'm wrong because I love it. When we say council's preferred option, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the one you guys really want. It's like that's the one that you've kind of said is the one so that you can get all your numbers and stuff. Is that right? Or it is the one you really want? No one's answering. That didn't happen. I'll flash my light in your face. And
we'll do what the community really push us to do within reason. We've got to do what's best for the community. So the preferred option is what we think as councillors is best for the community. But if the community comes back to us and says something else, and it's an election year, and some of us want to get voted back in, then we could change what the decision is at the end of the day. But yeah, the preferred is definitely the best in terms of dollar value that we can see at the moment.
Oh, okay, so cool. Sorry, I was just still living in LTP lands, but you're not going to cry about it if they pick something different. No, obviously, right. Okay, so that's got a lot of there's a lot of upsides and a lot of downsides. It's a really open document, and it really talks about some of the stuff that might not be awesome, which is really cool. That's what we all want to know. Okay, the second one is a standalone council-controlled organisation. So that's just like Gore will be like, we're going to open our own water shop, and we're just doing it on our own. Is that right? Yes. Okay, so number one is club. Buy a barbecue for your friend for their wedding instead of just a vase they'll never use. Number two, water shop all by ourselves. Number three, an in-house business unit. So stop me, but that would be, we're just going to do it on our own. What's the difference between an in-house business unit and a standalone council-controlled organisation?
I might touch on it a little bit. So a standalone council-controlled organisation is kind of like the preferred model that we've been talking about most of the time, the Southern Water Done Well big collaboration thing where everyone bands together, sets up a company, goes out, delivers water, but you're just doing it by yourself. So you're setting up a company still, you're still going out and delivering water, right? The key difference, whereas a standalone, like an in-house business unit, is kind of like doing it how we do it at the moment. But there's going to be a whole pile of change because we're going to have to deal with economic regulation. We're going to have to deal with increased activity from Taumata Arawai, who are our water services regulator, and probably also increased activity from our regional councils as well, who are typically starting to become more and more active in the regulatory space in terms of the stuff. We're also going to be under intense scrutiny from the government under an in-house business model because there are some specific requirements around ring fencing and financial sustainability in terms of delivery of three water services that they're going to want to make sure are being met all the time. So the reason we might want to do a standalone CCO is basically to get the debt off our books. But it also starts to produce that ring fencing that the government's requiring. So that ring fencing is where the government is saying any money you collect for delivery of water, you have to spend on water. You can't spend it on anything else. And we want to be absolutely certain that that's happening. So the government's going to enforce that. They're going to audit it. They're going to inspect it. They're going to require you to report on it. If you stick it in a CCO, that's really easy because the money that comes into the CCO can only be spent on water. The CCO only delivers water. But also the CCO has access to debt under different terms. So that's why you might do it to get it off the council's books. I would call that mini Southern Water Done Well, but without some of those benefits that we're talking about there that come from aggregation and scale in terms of workforce development and those kind of elements there. So, but yeah, the in-house delivery model is the one that looks the most similar to the current service, but it's not the current service. It will be certainly under a lot more scrutiny going forward.
Okay, so we've got club, water shop, or just keep doing it ourselves, but the fuzz are turning up like every week being like, let me see your books.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I understand this. Right, we've got time for a last question pretty much. I don't want to scuttle you all away, but Jess, I love this one, Jess. Could the water assets ever land in a situation where they go into privatisation through the joint CCO?
No one else is jumping in to answer it verbally. I see Jason shaking his head. The simple answer, I would say, is no. But I guess never say never in terms of that, the government can always change the rules on us. But at the moment, the law prohibits that. We're not allowed to privatise assets. They have to stay in public ownership. They will stay in public ownership for as long as we can make sure that they do, and as long as the law prevents that from moving. I can't see any future government certainly in the short or medium, or probably even the long term, looking to change that in a hurry.
Okay. No, probably not. Absolutely, definitely not. So have we got any of your talking points you wanted to say? Let me see if there was any that were really cool that I'm disappointed that I didn't get to hear about.
I could jump in, Sarah, and talk about why now. You touched on it really quickly.
Yeah.
And that's a requirement by government. I think actually if we had the opinion, especially from, I guess, a councillor's perspective, we would wait till the next election. These are some pretty big decisions. Unfortunately, government, to be honest, has had enough, and they've said September is when they want to see some answers and some commitments of what council's going to do moving forward. So they don't want to see it roll over into another term and a new set of councillors getting a bite of the cherry. They want it done this side of it. So it's not our choice. We need to get it done by September 3rd. So that's why we're up for consultation now, to get the opinions of the public.
Okay, but that doesn't mean, like, if we say, okay, we all want option 1, and then we'll go, yay, it's not going to, that means that everyone's going to just change the next day. Like, there's still a long way to go, isn't there? So this isn't panic stations. This is just like, what's the vague vibe?
There is, but whatever plan we put forward to the government, their expectation is we stick to it. So that doesn't preclude us from getting bigger, as we've talked about. We've had discussions with the minister where he said, yeah, no, all good. If people want to join, that's cool. But we're not really in the position of going, yeah, we're going to look at this joint CCO thing and then kind of, 6 months into next term turning around and going, oh, we're going to do in-house BAU because we don't like your government anymore. It doesn't really, they won't be too impressed with that.
Okay, but the terms and the nitty-gritty is still very fluid, and we're going to work out.
Absolutely.
Like before, we were saying, we haven't done that sort of like granular level, really looking at stuff, because that's just a massive waste of money and time. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, I feel good. Does everyone feel good and fulfilled about what happened today? I'm forgetting that I'm not at my ladies' meditation evening. I'm very sorry, everyone. So water done well. We're all feeling good and watery. I'm really hoping that, mainly because of my ignorance, but also because of your wonderful answering all these wonderful questions, that people are feeling far more across this situation and what's happening. So we are asking you to jump on this as an active consultation, and that's sitting there in the Let's Talk on the Gore District Council's Let's Talk portal, which is just a way of saying, like, hole in the internet where you shove things. So honestly, just go Google Gore Let's Talk. You don't even need the apostrophe, it'll find it for you. And jump in there and have a look. There's so much info, and it's really well written. It's really easy to understand. I understand a lot of it, and you have probably guessed this evening I need a lot of hand-holding. So all that info's there, and all the breakdown of all those 3 options is sitting there really clearly defined for you. And of course, if people want to talk more about it to somebody, Ben and Jace, what can they do?
For me, I do my bookings with Ben on Wednesday, so come in and see me. You'll have to get in quick for next week's before submissions close, or just give the office a ring. I'm more than happy to have a yarn. And Jason, you're probably the same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out and contact the Gore District Council office and ask to speak to somebody about Three Waters, and we will certainly try and answer as many questions as we can and make sure you have information that you need to submit on the proposal.
It's awesome. And Stu, I'm just going to give everyone your email address real quick.
No, I'm pretty sure that that the team of Ben and Jason and Debbie and everyone else at Gore District Council will be well equipped to answer your questions. In the event that they do get a hairy one, I'm sure I'll get it sent across my desk at some point, and I'll be sure to respond to that one and provide my input where I need to. So.
That's excellent. Okay, well, I think this has been a really helpful and constructive evening. Thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. It's been really exciting to get questions. I was going to think I was going to have to make them up, and it was going to get really weird, as you can guess. So thank you very much for this evening. Thanks for joining me, gents. And jump onto that Let's Talk website portal machine on the internet and have a hone and see what else you can find out. Thank you very much, and we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.